Good morning. The people who didn't hear it online, as I said good morning, a little one ran past and yelled it back at me, which is very, very cute. Good morning again. My name is Tim. I am a science teacher and a member of this congregation. I realised this morning that it's almost been 6 years since I first came to One Church, which feels completely mad. But I hope this morning that both, whether you're in the room or online, you can feel incredibly welcome to our time this morning. This morning we're thinking about the theme of rest and Sabbath, and Leanne's going to be speaking to us later. And so before we get into things any further, I figured it might be good to start with an opportunity to turn to someone near to you, maybe someone that you don't know, and have a little chat. The question that I have got for you, in case you need something to start you off, is what is the thing that brings you rest? Okay, so have a think. When you reach a day off from work or from school, what is the one thing you want to do to give yourself some good rest? Hello. Okay. Sorry to end those conversations late now. Hopefully you can carry them on later. I should have prefaced before I asked you to chat to someone next to you that you're completely free to not to. I'm very aware as I asked the question about what is the thing that brings you rest. For me, often that is not being around people or talking to people. But the wonderful thing is that we're all different in the fact that there's all sorts of different things that bring us all rest. Again, whether that's running around and being with friends, whether that's, again, being in solitude for a bit, whether that's curling up with a good book or listening to some music, going out in nature. There's endless possibilities in our world for things that can bring us rest. And it's really, I'm sure as Leanne is going to talk to us later, rest is a really important thing for us as humans. In a moment, we are going to sing together with the band to lead us. But before we do that, let's just take a moment to center ourselves and to pray before we get on to singing together. So, Father God, we thank you that you are the God of rest, that you invite us to rest in you. Would you help us this morning as we are together and as we reflect together? Would you help us understand more what it means to find our rest and to find the things that are restful for us? Thank you, God, for bringing us here today, and that we can share this little bit of time thinking and reflecting so that we can go into our week feeling more energized. In your name, Jesus, amen. If you are able to and would like to, would you please stand so that we can sing together?
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Last time. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up our eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. My eyes in wonder, and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
God, would you empower us to go and make change in the world where we can? Would you help us identify opportunities where we can bring your love into the situations that we are in? In your name, Jesus. Amen. Right, if you want to grab a seat. Once again, a very big good morning and welcome. If you came in during the singing, I always love it when I've gone to sit down during the singing and I turn around and there's a whole bunch of extra faces that weren't here before. It just makes me happy. What can I say? A couple of things to say before we move on to the next thing. If you are a newer member of our community or have only been here a couple of times, please do grab one of these green cards. There's a whole bunch of them at the back, or see Fran, who is wearing matching green to this, who sat at the back, and she'll be happy to talk to you about this. It's a card, basically, if you want to know a bit more about what we do and all of the things going on in One Church, so please do get involved with that. Fantastic. I realised during the singing that I'd forgot to say that at the beginning, and I told Fran I'd say it at the beginning, so I've said it now. Right, we have come just about to the point in our service where our children and young people are going to leave us. So if you have a young one, please take them out through that door. If you don't know roughly where to go, ask someone who's also going that way, and they'll be able to tell you. So please go now. And I realise I say that about the room being really full, and then my next command makes the room disappear in half of its size. But it's all good. Wonderful. Whilst our children and young people are leaving, a quick plug. If you are a person who's very afraid of sitting in the front, I love sitting in the very front of the church because for a few different reasons. Number one, I get a front row seat to whatever the children who've got 700 times more energy than me are doing in this corner and at the front, which is always delightful. But also I get to hear everyone else singing behind me, which is one of the best. I don't know what it is about music. I guess it's part of the reason why I endured so long in churches, is that music does something to us that brings us together, and hearing everyone else sing is brilliant. When I watch online, I find it's one of the things that I miss, is hearing everyone else's voices in the room. So thank you for singing and being involved, because it really does make a difference, even in those weird subconscious ways. Anyway, we've now come to the point in the service with the notices, and there are a whole bunch of them. So I'm handing over to Dave, who knows what's going on, rather than me bumbling through and having to look at the email 17 times. So here we go.
Gosh. Times are desperate, if that's true. Morning, everybody. My name's Dave. I'm one of the ministers here. I've got a bunch of things to tell you about, so I've done some slides. Bet the kids wish they were still in now. So let me just run through a few things that are happening in the life of the church, some important things to tell you about, and don't want you to miss out. So tonight is for those of you who are new, we try and do these regular evening services that have just lots of space in them. There's not a lot going on. It's just a chance to have an hour where you have some contemplative space. And I'm reading it tonight, and we're going to do something called Lectio Divina on a passage, which some of you will go, oh yeah, know that. Others of you think, is that Hogwarts language? Lectio Divina. I guess it does sound like that, doesn't it? But come along, and you'll find out about it. So it's just an hour here at 6:30. Chilled, lovely space. And this room, something about it in the evenings, that just a lovely space to just be still in. So that's at 6:30 tonight. Next Saturday, or Saturday that's coming, we have our we keep calling it midwinter feast. I think the purist would say that this is a celebration of the beginning of spring, if you can get your head around that. But it is the midpoint between the start of winter and the start of spring. But it's definitely looking forward to the days getting longer and all of that stuff. And it coincides with us celebrating the Feast of St. Bridget, and she turned water into ale, and she made pies. I don't know if that is true. I don't think she did, but she definitely did, because that's what we're doing. So if you want to come along, it's just a social. It's nothing sort of more than that, but it's nothing less than that. Chance to hang out. Though we will provide the ale, alcoholic and non-alcoholic versions. If you want to bring your own drink with you, then please do that. And we will, some of us will be making the pies and providing that. So you just have to sort of bring yourself along. But if you don't book in, by midnight tonight, you cannot come. Okay? Now, those of you sitting there going, I know what day's like. This is a woolly liberal church. They just let you do anything you like. Well, snowflakes, I've got news for you. At midnight tonight, the hammer comes down, and no amount of bribing is going to get you in the room, okay? So sign up. I think there's about 65 people already, which is great. But we really need to know final numbers, and I suspect it's a bit more than that. So sign up. Is that enough of a push? Don't come whining to me. Okay. Let me tell you about, I'll leave that there for a second. Lots of you will know we are partnering with a brilliant organisation called Orchards that helps women who have been victims of sexual exploitation or survivors of sexual exploitation and puts them in safe houses and supports them into a new, fresh start in life. And we feel very fortunate to be partnering with that organisation. And our little bit of it is that because we sold an old vicarage, is that we bought a little one-bed flat to start that work here in Brighton. We need to, because the way that we are set up as a church, the power lies within the congregation. I have 0. In fact, I don't have 0. I have 1 vote, which can be cancelled out by any of you at any time. You'll be glad to know. But we do need to vote on things like purchasing property. So after the service on the 11th, it will be really short. Doesn't mean it's not important, but it will be really short. And it would be good if we are corporate. For those people who know that you're a partner, you signed a sort of part of the membership here of One Church. If you can stick around just for a bit after the service on the 11th, we can do that piece of work. Does that make sense? The next thing I want to tell you about is I went to some training run by the Clare Project, and such a brilliant trans woman trainer did this fantastic training, and I was just so inspired by it and so encouraged. And she was gracious and she was wise, and it was brilliant. So I said, would you come and do it for us? And this isn't necessarily about faith and these issues. This is about being a human being and understanding other people's experience. And if you have questions about what do these different terms mean and pronouns and all this sort of thing, they cover that stuff so brilliantly. So I'd really encourage you to come if you can on the evening of the 26th of February. A little just fun thing. We started a Spotify playlist that is a brilliant example already of the diversity in our church. There's there's just such a mixture of songs already. We've got everything from sort of bluegrass to children's worship songs. It's a wonderful mixture of just sort of joyful or meaningful songs. So if you like your music, you can add 1 or 2 songs in 1 or 2 songs that are saving you at the minute, and chuck them on that playlist. And it is a fun piece of collaboration. So do that if you'd like to do that. And this should have been my first slide. I don't know how it's gone out of order, but this is about today. We have a pub lunch together. So Fran and Sam are hosting you at the Open House pub. Are we near numbers, Fran? Not a clue. But we've got space for 15 people to have lunch over there. Come. We'll fit you in. So if you sort of think, oh, it'd be nice to go and have lunch with some other people, then meet where Fran is by the coat rack, and you go over at about 12:30. Sam, come up here quickly. I think that's everything. Fran, have I forgotten anything? There will be other things. There's a Lent journey group starting. Should have mentioned that. If you're not in a journey group, we are starting Lent together. We've settled on what we're going to be looking at during Lent on Sundays, which I think is quite exciting. And we're looking at the 7 last words of Christ. And that's what we're going to do throughout the weeks. And I think it's going to be really good. I'm excited about it. And if you want to dig a bit deeper into that, there will be a journey group that is temporary, that's set up to just go through Lent together. And if you think, oh, that sounds fun, then speak to Fran afterwards. That would be great. Yes, I will do. Someone's getting baptised on Easter Sunday, which is great. I've tried to persuade them to go in the sea, but they're not having it because they're smart and wise. So some of you won't even know, but we have a baptistry under this stage, and so we will be doing that. And so I'm just giving you a heads up because you might think, oh, maybe I'd like to do that, particularly in this series where we're thinking about discipleship. Again, there's a lot of myths, I think, the church has built up around baptism, that it's sort of for some stage of your career in Christianity, and you sort of at least A-level, perhaps degree-level Christianity, when actually it's completely the introduction and a way of going, okay, let's begin. and I want to be part of this thing, even if I don't fully understand it and don't fully get it. And so that's going to be fun. But the water's going to be there. It will be balmy and lovely. So if you fancy being baptized, then come and chat with me, and I'll talk to you about that. One of our sort of key projects, really, as a church, started over maybe about 11 years ago, maybe a little bit more now. It's called Chomp. We talk about it quite a lot. It's been a superb project that has, we've met lots and lots of people and served thousands of meals. And we've struggled with funding for that recently, and we've sort of talked about that in church forums before, but Sam's just going to give us a kind of an update about that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like Dave said, Chomp has been doing amazing work. It's been growing a lot over the last few years. And for a number of years, that work has been funded through a few different ways. One of them has been the National Lottery, which paid for a couple of our salaried staff for like 10 years, basically. And then various other bits of just individual generosity and grant funding. But as we've been looking at the budgets for the coming year, it's just been getting trickier and trickier and trickier to say with any kind of confidence, oh, we know we can do this. And what that's been doing is, as these things do over time, putting an incredible pressure on our team. Like we've been kind of saying to them for a while, like, hey, you might have a job in February, or you might not. But also, you know, as one of the natures of an organization like this is people leave, and then you're anxious about funding, so you don't replace them, and then the kind of load lands on someone else. And the long and the short of it is that our two absolutely fantastic project staff, Rosie and Sophia, who've been mind-blowing for the last couple of years. Really, really great in the room, really great in admin, really great with food. They've decided to step down from their posts as of basically now. And we're not going to immediately re-advertise. It may be that money comes in to re-advertise for those posts, in which case we will definitely do it. We're going to keep going for grants for this kind of work. But what we want to do in the meantime is think, how can we hold the space that Chomp is for our families in a kind of low-cost way for the next season? And basically what that might mean is us saying, well, you know, there's still this community in this part of Brighton who've come to depend on this community, who've come to really value and thrive in this community of people. And we don't want to suddenly pull the plug on that and disappear. And so we're not going to. We're going to still keep showing up. We're going to still keep putting on vats of food and holding space for people to come together and experience community and be together and have food and see their kids play. But it might be quite simple. It'll probably be me saying, hey, that Tuesday at Gloucester Place, we're going to need a bunch of volunteers and some people who know how to use a kitchen and some people who know how to do a craft activity or just want to come along and help and be with families. Basically what I'm saying is Chomp is going to look a little bit more like it did when we launched it for a little while, which is really heavily volunteer focused and maybe slightly more chaotic. We've gotten quite good at it being fairly professional and us kind of knowing exactly who's coming and what their mobile numbers are. And it might be a bit more like, the room is full of people, here's some food. But we still just really care about this stuff. Like, it feels so dumb that the point where we're having to make these kind of decisions is the point where more and more households are struggling, both with food poverty and with isolation in general, and with kids who have increasing needs around mental health and outlets for themselves, and you know, all this kind of stuff. And so this kind of next season is kind of us saying we want to still be there for those families. Might be a little less often, but we want to still be there for those families. And so what does that look like for you? And it might be that you think, actually, in the Easter holiday, I could give a lunchtime and come along and help out, in which case I'd love to talk to you. Or it might be that you're like, hey, I could do a little bit of organizing for one of these chomps and make sure that there's a craft activity and some stuff that's been bought, in which case I'd love to talk to you. So just be aware that that's the situation that we're in. It's not the ideal one, but also it is one that we're going into with a bit of, okay, what comes out of this? What comes next? What's the next season of this thing? And not how do we kind of shut down and leave, but how do we keep serving these families in the situation that we're currently in? Does that make sense? Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. I'm in danger of just repeating what he said, but just to emphasize. It just feels a bit heavy for us, those of us just passionate about this thing, and 10 years of building relationships and communities around Brighton, and then funders say things like, oh yeah, but we've funded that, we were onto something new, and right now we're at the sort of deepest level of relationship we've got, and these are the sorts of communities where when funding gets cut, it gets cut there first. And it just feels so unfair and wrong. So we're trying to consider funding. We're looking at new ways of sort of packaging it so that it feels a bit sexier and new for those people who feel the need for that. But keep on sort of being aware of that. Pray for the work that we're doing with those families, and go and grab Sam if you think you could help in any way. Is that okay? Thank you so much. Thanks, Tim.
Fantastic. Before we sing again and then hear from Leanne, I'd just like to hold some time for us to pray. In case you didn't know, yesterday was Holocaust Memorial Day. I didn't know that until there was an assembly at my school this week, and the history teacher told me. And as I've been thinking about it more and more, I've been reflecting on something that this history teacher, Miss Bryan, said. She said, Holocaust Memorial Day is about remembering the lives of the people who were lost during the Holocaust. LGBT people, people with disabilities, Jewish people, people who didn't fit into the Nazis' plan. And after the Second World War and after the Holocaust happened, kind of loads of countries got together and vowed that this would never happen again. But we know as humans living in the world that didn't stop people from waging war against each other, from committing horrible acts against each other. And when you look at the news or on social media at the moment, there's just so many things going on in our world that are incredibly heartbreaking and incredibly depressing to look at. I'm sure there are stronger words than that. From conflicts that we see around the world in Palestine and in the Congo and in all sorts of different places around the world, to systems of governance falling apart in places like Argentina. There's so many places. And I remember standing here before Christmas on the 3rd of December and saying something very similar, saying I looked up places where there are conflict in the world and was incredibly depressed by the number of places that were listed. And so I think it's important for us, especially on, like I say, this weekend with this day where people think about this big event that happened for a group of people, that we hold some time to have some quiet thought, reflection, prayer about these situations. So whatever situation it is that's heavy on your heart right now, whether it is a local thing or something international, I'm going to give us a couple of minutes to sit in some quiet and just have a think and a pray, and then I will kind of wrap us up by finishing off with a prayer. God, it can be so easy for us to get completely overwhelmed when we look at the world. Would you help us, God, to not let ourselves fall into a pit of despair where we don't know what we can do, would you help us, God, to find ways in which we can make change where we are. God, both on a local level and on an international level, there's so much pain and suffering and unrest. God, we want to see your kingdom come, your kingdom of peace come on earth. Would you help leaders, both local, national, international, to make correct decisions that bring your peace and your love? And would you help us to find ways in which we can be agents of change, whether it's through donating money or time or whatever it is, God, would you help us to find ways in which we can be your love bringers, your peace bringers in this world. Lord, help us to not be overwhelmed, but be moved into action. And Lord, thank you that you are with us even on the days when it's all too much and when we do feel overwhelmed. And when we do feel like there's no hope in the world, thank you that you do not abandon us. Thank you, God, that you are so much bigger and so much more capable than any of us individually. But help us, God, to move, to bring your justice and your peace and your love. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Right, we are going to have some more music and some more opportunity to sing together. And then after the music is done, Leanne is going to come and share with us.
Do stand if you're able. When your faith in perfect love can't explain the pain that you feel, you will find you've looked for a sign above, but he was there in the dirt where you stood. He was there in the dirt where you stood. Sing that again. When your faith in perfect love can't explain the pain that you feel, you will find you look for a sign above, but he was there in the dirt where you stood. He was there in the dirt where you stood. And there's hope found here and now, here within the real, in the midst of all we've done, all we've given up on. He was with us every step, feeling what we feel when your soul was buried down, burdened by the long road. And in time we learn to grow through the pain and into hope. For the storms they come and swallow up the sun, but the light lives on and on. But the light lives on and on. And there's hope found here and now, here within the real, in the midst of all we've done, all we've given up on. He was with us every step, feeling what we feel when your soul was buried down, buried by the long road. There's hope found here and now, here within the real, in the midst of all we've done, all we've given up on. He was with us every step, feeling what we feel when your soul was buried down, burdened by the long road. In my longing, in my waiting, will your presence be enough? When I'm fearful, when I'm doubting, will I have the strength to trust? You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. In my grieving, in my sorrow, will your goodness steady me? When I'm blinded, when I'm hopeless, will I have the eyes to see? You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. Together. Together, you're the one who holds all things together. Together, together, you're the one who holds all things together. In my serving, when I'm hidden, will I trust the Father sees? When you call me, will I listen? Will I follow where you lead? I will follow where you lead. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. Together, together, you're the one who holds all things together. Together, together, you're the one who holds all things together.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Leanne. For anyone who's not met me before, I'm one of the trustees here at One Church. So I'm going to be continuing our series on discipleship this morning. And that can feel like quite a weighty word. It's a long word. But really it's about what we were just singing about following where Jesus is leading, and there's a simplicity to that, but it's also a life's work. It's something that we have to keep refocusing on. So we've been looking at different ways in which we can do that over the weeks. And I'm going to be looking specifically this morning about Sabbath. And we were talking about resting. How do we find rest when we were having a little chat earlier? And Sabbath comes from the Hebrew meaning to rest. But the practice of Sabbath, beyond just resting, is this ancient practice of taking time, typically at the end of the week, typically in Christianity on a Sunday, to rest, to put down our work. And sometimes it's called the Lord's Day. It's something that has been practiced for thousands of years. Our Jewish forebearers were already practicing this before Jesus' time. So it's something that people have been trying to practice for a very long time. Personally, I try to have a day a week where I don't do any work. It's not always on a Sunday. And I think it's fair to say I've experienced varying degrees of success. You know, we go through seasons. Work looks different to each of us at different periods. Maybe we might not be formally in employment, but we've still got all these things that we need to do. And as we go through those seasons, our disciplines and our habits might need to evolve and change and flex as life changes around us. Two things I just wanted to share, some little tidbits that have helped me in that practice. There's a great book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in that, he says a really simple rule of thumb to think, is this something I should be doing? Is this work? And the criteria that he has for Sabbath is it rest or is it worship? And to have those as the two things to focus on. And that can look different for each of us. Worship, yes, it's about singing together and being together in church, but maybe it's taking a walk in the Downs or going to sit on the seafront. There's different ways of resting and worshipping that will look different for each of us. So that's something to think about. Another handy thing that I heard is if you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. And if you work with your mind, Sabbath with your hands. So for me, someone who is at a computer most of the time in the week, actually getting the crochet out or going for a walk, being physical is great. Maybe if you're someone who's on your feet all week, just snuggling up and reading a book, that might be the thing for you. So if that's helpful, it's definitely something that gets me thinking. And in this series about discipleship, Dave introduced the series a few weeks back and talked about learning and unlearning, following and unfollowing. So what might we need to learn and unlearn about Sabbath? Who or what might we need to unfollow in order to make the space to follow Jesus in this practice of Sabbath? And I think this is really important to keep emphasizing. How can it be life-giving rather than creating a sense of guilt or shame? There's a risk with discipleship that it becomes legalistic, that it becomes about following rules rather than being transformed. So I've given you a couple of little tips to maybe start thinking about Sabbath, and there will be, more of those. But I want to focus as much on the why practice Sabbath as the how, and hopefully you'll find something in that motivates you to explore the practice of Sabbath, if that isn't something that you've been doing, or maybe it's something that's fallen off the radar. Taking one day a week, entirely free from work, is a divine rhythm that's given to us. But if that isn't possible, I urge you to think about a creative way to find Sabbath. How could you find a little bit of Sabbath within each day or a little bit within each week? And I'm going to take this expansive look so that we can each think creatively about how it can work for us. If the bar feels too high, then set the bar for yourself. If a day a week just feels like pie in the sky with where you are and the things that are going on with you at the moment, then maybe half a day. Can you just give yourself permission to take a lunch break each day this week? How can you find those moments of rest? So I'm going to go through, have a look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, and reflect a bit on what does that mean for us now in the society and the world that we find ourselves in. And I mentioned already, this is ancient practice of Sabbath, this ancient wisdom. And so when we look to the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, we can see Sabbath is referenced again and again in this sacred text. And it's actually God's practice from the start. So we see in Genesis 1, the opening poem of the Bible, this story of God creating the world in 6 days. So if you think you've had a busy week, remember that God managed to create the world, and even God was able to take a rest. So at the beginning of Genesis 2, we hear this, which hopefully come up on the screen for you now. By the 7th day, God had finished his work. On the 7th day, he rested from all his work. God blessed the 7th day. He made it a holy day, because on that day he rested from his work, all the creating God had done. So it's baked into the story of the creation of the world and the universe. And I think that we can see Sabbath as a gift from God, an example being set by the creator of the universe about what a healthy rhythm of life can look like. Then in Exodus 28 to 11, we see Sabbath listed as one of the 10 commandments. And it's actually the longest description given to any of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill doesn't need a lot of explanation. But Sabbath has this quite detailed explanation. So it says, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Work 6 days and do everything you need to. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to God your God. Don't do any work, not you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servant, nor your maid, nor your animals, nor even the foreign guest visiting in your town. For in 6 days God made heaven, earth, and sea, and everything in them. He rested on the 7th day. Therefore God blessed the Sabbath day. He set it apart as holy. So we keep hearing this calling back to Genesis throughout. And what I like that's captured in this, that I think is particularly pertinent to us now in the moment that we find ourselves alive, is we live in such an individualistic society. We live in a very atomized way. People in previous generations lived more communally. And so this reminder, it's not just about you and your personal practice of not working on a Sunday or whatever Sabbath looks for you, but it's about Sabbath as a communal act, as a communal care, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's part of this I really want to challenge myself around. How can we be making sure that we're encouraging people around us as well to take the rest that they need? This gift from God is available to everybody. And then there are these nudges later in the Old Testament to remember the Exodus. And if we think back to the series that we went through as a church in Exodus in the autumn, it gives us some clues as to why the Old Testament keeps referring back to Exodus. And often when Sabbath is talked about, it's talked about at the same time as the Exodus. Because when the people of Israel were forced into production of bricks under Pharaoh, when they were slaves in Egypt, they then were freed from that. But the trauma of it was so ingrained in them that they kept forgetting that they were free, and they needed to keep being reminded. I think it's already been mentioned at some point during this series, but Walter Brueggemann wrote a fantastic book called Sabbath as Resistance, and he puts it like this. Remember that the pattern of coercion has been broken. Do you, when you wake, remember what you are supposed to have done? The fact that you did not meet expectations? Do you fall asleep counting bricks? Do you dream of more bricks you have to make yet, or how bricks you have made were flawed? We dream so because we have forgotten the Exodus. Well, Sabbath is the break, regular and public, that permits us to remember. Those who remember and keep Sabbath find they are less driven, less coerced, less frantic to meet deadlines, free to be rather than to do. Because Sabbath is the great festival of freedom, when Pharaoh and all coercive expectations are dismissed. When I had a particularly high-pressured job, I used to have quite a lot of stress dreams, and I would wake up and find, as I was coming out of my half-asleep, half-awake state, that I was composing emails in my mind to colleagues about things that were going on. So this line about, do you, when you wake up, remember what you are supposed to have done, that hit me, and I'm sure some of you will be able to relate. So in the Hebrew Bible, we see that God rests. So if even God needs to rest, then we shouldn't feel bad when we need to rest. And there's this long precedent of setting this day aside for rest that's been there from the beginning of time. People have been trying to live this way for many centuries. But if it was easy, it wouldn't need to be repeated again and again. So if we find it hard, we're in good company. So the core of discipleship is trying to be more like Jesus, trying to be a little more who he calls us to be each day, even if it's one step forward, two steps back sometimes. And the good news is that Jesus invites us to rest. And I think everyone who's spoken in this series has used this same passage from Matthew, and it certainly bears repeating in the context of Sabbath. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And I think the reason that we've all kept coming back to this passage is really the heart of healthy discipleship. Jesus' leadership was not the kind of leadership that the Jews awaiting a Messiah were expecting. They were under a military occupation, and some believed that they would have a military leader to help them overcome that. And Jesus' leadership is not the style of leadership that is held up in our society now either. The Beatitudes do not say, "Blessed are those who hustle, for they will have a huge social media following." The greatest commandment is not, "Love the Lord your God with all your productivity and all your influence and all of your grit." Endless work and grind is not the life that Jesus calls us to. And when God takes on a body as Christ, he's not superhuman without any embodied needs. We see Jesus frequently taking rest for himself many times in the gospel. In Luke 5, we hear this. But now, more than ever, the word about Jesus spread abroad. Many crowds would gather to hear him and to be cured of their diseases, but he would withdraw to deserted places and pray. For Jesus, rest is a pattern, a practice, and as the work of his ministry increases, it becomes more important to rest, not less. We hear it again and again. In John 4, he sits by the well when he is tired. In Mark 4, we hear how he is sleeping on a boat during a storm. He listens to his body. He's not distracted by everything going on around him. And Jesus seems to be against that legalism around keeping Sabbath. In Mark 2, he says, Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for Sabbath. It calls us again to see Sabbath and rest as a gift, something to give us life, not a strict set of rules to cause us more stress and more shame and more guilt. So making space for that Sabbath rest is a way to practice that discipleship, that we don't need to do anything to achieve. It's accessible, it's available to all of us. So thinking a bit now in more detail, what does this look like? How do we make this work in our lives? Walter Brueggemann also talks about us not commodifying ourselves, and how Sabbath is both resistance and alternative. It's part of a different way of living, not conforming ourselves to the world and society and the ways it seems to want us to do all the time. And we have this perfect pattern of how to build rest into our lives offered to us by God. But in the same way that Christianity is and has been manipulated to support things like nationalism and white supremacy, it can and has been manipulated to support capitalism. The fact that we have to keep talking about this means something has gone very wrong. Why do we need to be encouraged to rest and Sabbath? It's a no-brainer, surely. But any of us who have tried to just sit still, tried to rest, it's strangely hard, and we often find ourselves in that restlessness. And I think that there's a real risk of the Protestant work ethic affecting how we see Sabbath. This damaging theology which upholds diligence, discipline, and frugality above all other virtues that has become so pervasive in much of the West. And it's characterized perhaps best by the phrase, "The devil makes work for idle hands." This idea that if we stop, something bad might happen. And I think that this has become part of the secular mindset as well. It's almost completely detached from the theology, perhaps where it first came from. I know that being brought up in a non-religious household, I certainly didn't escape it. Some of you know that I was a member of Girl Guiding for a really long time. And I remember when I was 10 and I was making my promise as a guide, learning that one of the guide rules, the laws, is a girl guide uses her time wisely. To get us thinking that we should be using our time wisely. And something else from that period of my life sticks with me. One of my favourite teachers, and maybe this is why I remember it and why it had such an impact on me. She was an incredible RE teacher. But I remember her saying, "The way you spend your evenings now will determine how you get to spend them for the rest of your life." So if you're not knuckling down and doing your homework, that's going to affect your life in the future. And it's not untrue, but to overemphasize that can be quite insidious. And it definitely infiltrated me at a young age, this thinking that my goodness and my worth were tied to my productivity. And as a kid on free school meals, this was particularly damaging, I think, because for a long time I thought if I wasn't working hard enough all the time, then I didn't deserve to dream of a better future for myself. And now I feel conflicted. I've been able to reframe my relationship with work. That hard work did pay off. I was able to go to university, and I now have the privilege of work which is well paid enough for me to be able to have good periods of rest. I remember my mum working 2 jobs when I was a kid, and I can see how rest can seem so out of reach when you're trying to make ends meet. So either we're being exploited for our labour and we're too exhausted to even examine our relationship with rest, or maybe we believe the lies about how our work is so important that we need to be contactable every hour of the day. Tricia Hersey's work has been really influential to me in my exploration of this. And I want to acknowledge that her work, she's the founder of something which has got a brilliant name, Nap Ministries. So I definitely recommend you check them out on Instagram. And she's the author of a great book called Rest is Resistance. And that work is rooted in Black liberation and womanist theology, which is obviously not a place that I can speak precisely from. But she emphasizes in the book something which has become a bit of a guiding principle for me, that none of us are free until all of us are free. And I think that when we're thinking about how rest may be more accessible to some than others, that is really pertinent. She says, "Those who are wealthy, as well as those who are poor, are caught up in the spiritual deficiency that occurs when you are tied to a system like capitalism in any way. We are all harmed in unique ways." And picking up from Fran's talk last week, Hersey also speaks powerfully about abundance as a starting point for creating space for rest in our lives. She says, living under a capitalist system is to be confronted with a model of scarcity. This space makes you falsely believe there is not enough of everything. Not enough money, not enough care, not enough love, not enough attention, not enough peace, not enough connection, not enough time. There is abundance. The desperate and valid question of how can I rest if I have bills to pay is the beating heart of this work. It's the evidence of the trauma endured by the hands of grind culture and evidence of our need to reimagine rest. Resting as a form of resistance will be part of a lifelong unraveling, a mindset, a slow and consistent practice filled with grace. In John 10:10, Jesus says, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. So what does that abundant life look now? And how might Sabbath help us to tap into it? And it really is a lifelong unraveling. I really had to resist the urge to turn this whole talk into some kind of girl boss your way to Sabbath in 7 easy steps. And I have to confess to a moment when I've been preparing for this sermon, but I was really hit in the face with my own inadequacy in this area, with just how deeply entrenched I am in this grind culture, worldly, brick-building way of thinking. So last weekend, I was listening to the audiobook of Sabbath is Resistance by Walter Brueggemann on the tube. I was listening to a chapter, ironically, as you're here, on multitasking at 1.5 speed, when the narration was interrupted by an advert on the game I was also playing at the same time as listening to the audiobook. And I literally just turned everything off on my phone and just had to have a little talk to myself on the tube there and then. So I know that this isn't easy, and I'm not pretending that it is. But how do we respond? So in that, try not to beat yourself up. I try not to beat myself up in that instance when I realised how ridiculous it was that I was doing that in trying to prepare for a sermon on Sabbath. I think it's a bit like if any of you have practiced mindfulness, when they say to notice your thoughts and then come back to your breath. So I'm trying to notice my behaviour, not judge it, not to judge myself, and then to come back. To come back to knowing already that I am enough, that I already have God's love, and that I am able to rest. All we can do in life is keep coming back, keep turning towards God and the example that has been set for us in Jesus. And you might think, I don't work on Sundays, but what are the insidious things that are creeping in? Checking emails, WhatsApping colleagues, maybe it's filling our weekend with so much life admin that we don't have time to rest, or maybe filling it with so much that is all great and good stuff, but doesn't give us enough time to stop. It's been interesting for me to spend time on this topic, and I've realised how much my own understanding of rest and Sabbath is evolving. I used to subscribe to the adage that you can't pour from an empty cup. If anyone's heard that. You can't pour from an empty cup. And there is truth in that, but it also suggests that rest is always tied to then being more productive. So it's all very well taking time to rest. And maybe if maybe you have got some good patterns of rest, and this might be the next step and the next challenge for you is to reframe how you're thinking about rest and how you can maybe decouple that even further from the stresses and the pressures to be productive. Brueggemann says that Sabbath is not simply the pause that refreshes, but the pause that transforms. What would being transformed by Jesus through rest look like? So I definitely want to keep going deeper into this work, to move away from thinking that rest is either to recover from all of the work that we've just done or preparing to be more productive. Rest isn't lazy. It's not a luxury. It's not something that we have to earn. It is a good and holy gift given to us by God. How might we go about realizing this in our lives? Well, Tricia Hersey has a few suggestions. Some of these may resonate more with you than others, but she suggests, as she calls them, some places to begin. 1, detox from social media weekly, monthly, or more. Begin to heal the individual trauma you have experienced that makes it difficult for you to say no and maintain healthy boundaries. 3, start a daily practice of daydreaming. 4, accept that there is no quick fix, magic bullet, or instant change. 5, slowly accept that you've been brainwashed. Your socialization in a capitalist culture makes this true. Begin to deprogram by accepting this truth. 6, slow down. 7, you are enough now. If you have to repeat this to yourself every day, do so. 8, begin to repair the ways white supremacy and capitalism have wrecked your self-esteem and your self-worth. Understand exhaustion is not productive. You are not resting to gain energy, to be more productive and to do more. 9, listen more. 10, create systems of community care. And I touched on this a little at the beginning, but I think that this idea of community care for me is going to be part of that next stage of exploring and thinking what that looks like. So I'm going to start trying to sum up and tie all of those threads together. Following Jesus means following the one who invites us to rest, free from legalism and shame. Now, Sabbath is called a spiritual practice, and I think that means because we have to practice it. And if forming good habits was easy, I'm sure the world would look a very different place. The love of God means that we do not need to do anything to earn that love. How can we remind others and ourselves of this regularly? And living our lives differently and resisting the constant work that the world demands of us can perhaps be a great witness to the work of Jesus in our lives. Jesus uses many metaphors in the Gospels to describe the kingdom of heaven. And one of those is when he describes the kingdom of heaven like yeast that works through the dough. How can this small thing of Sabbath work its way through our lives? How can you bring more rest into your own life? How can you be an example? And how can you encourage others in your home, in your workplace? I pray that we can all find ways to embed the rhythm of weekly Sabbath into our lives. And as a stepping stone, if that feels too much and too far off right now, I pray that each of us will find some time to daydream this coming week. I found this beautiful blessing online, which I think touches on many of the things that I've talked about. It will take a few minutes to read it, and so I just invite you, as I move into that now, to take this as a moment of rest. You don't need to do anything, you can just be. You might want to close your eyes to block out distractions. You might want to listen to each word or just let the words wash over you. Maybe a phrase will catch your imagination and you can follow it down a daydream rabbit hole. All is okay. Nothing is expected of you. So this is Blessing for a Rest by Kate Suffling. And hold it in your belly full, a stretch that slows the heart and mind, slackens fibers, now recalling how to loosen, how to lessen, how there's nourishment in surrender. Begin the softening, slump and slumber, slow the spinning, the wanting, the needs, except for this one, the one called rest. She has stood outside at the door, not banished, but told to wait, with until I and until it, until she turned to slumber. May you wake her now, draw her in, lead her by the hand. She's surprised and exultant, but moving sweet and slow. May you find in her a stillness that does not produce, won't move you onward, inch you forward, drive you upward in your climb, and will stir a sickly fear at first, just at the thought of these moments that pass like sand through your fingers, only to leave you in the very same place. To hold them in silence, in leaking cupped hands, becomes a declaration, frail at first, but sound, that you are worthy in this moment of this extravagance called being. May you learn that rest's teachings are a slow and fragile harvest that bruises when plucked or shaken from the tree, best gathered by letting the fruit fall into waiting upward palms. Be covered in its sticky juice, shamelessly idle, sitting still on the porch or the park bench or the hammock. Be stubborn in your contentment and your peace amidst the frenzy. Make your stillness a thorn in the side of collective haste. When you've rested yourself full, may you find you've had enough. Fruit soaked and stillness saturated, re-enter the toil. The palms of your soul slowly open, facing upward, ripened fruit in hand. Continue to eat, be filled, but be ravenous with the yearning that rest be a table wide and full. Carry its banquet to the dismal, unmarked corners where peace is a hoarded fruit held out of reach. Bruise your hands in the raising of old stone walls to spread fine tablecloths upon the scattered rubble and make rest a sacred sweetness at the fingertips for all. Amen. Now, I've got a big written. Thank you. I really liked it, and I just felt I really wanted to share it with you this week, so thank you. I've got a big reminder at the bottom of my page to tell you that if you have tiny humans, you may now go and collect them, or not so tiny humans, if they're through here. And we're going to sing one more song together, and Tim will wrap up.
Do you stand if you're able? It's a terrible start. I felt like as I was playing that, I just knew I wasn't going to hit the key. It's supposed to be a big, beautiful moment. I might just go straight into the chorus and we'll figure out the verse. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. This is where my hope lies. This is where my soul sighs, and I will always find my rest in you. And who is Lord? Only Lord. Who is God? Only God. You are the you are most good. Matchless is your love. Our praise will rise above. Your peace like a river floods over us. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. This is where my hope lies. This is where my soul sighs, and I will always find my rest in you. And so full of mercy, beauty and mystery, you are most hidden, but always with us. And our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. This is where my hope lies. This is where my soul sighs, and I will always find my rest in you. And our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. And and you cannot change, yet you change everything, and you cannot change, yet you change everything, and you cannot change, yet you change everything, and you cannot change, yet you change and you cannot change, yet you change everything, and you cannot change, yet you change everything, and you cannot change, yet you change everything.
As we come to the end of our time, may the Lord of Sabbath help you find places where you can break the bar of productivity and find place to rest, to daydream, to dream of a better future. Thank you, God, for the time that we have had together to contemplate what your vision is. Help us this week to think more about Sabbath and to find those spaces. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you for being with us this morning. Hopefully you found some really useful stuff out of what Leanne was talking about. I know I have got a lot to think about this idea of Sabbath. Last thing from me, just a reminder, if you want to find out more about the life of One Church and everything that we do, please do grab a green card. And if you're wanting to come to the pub lunch at the back, about 12:30, people will head over to open house. Other than that, have a fantastic week, wherever it may take you. And I look forward to seeing all your faces again in the future.